Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're listening from. My name is Eric, and this is the Five Head Podcast. Welcome to episode 17 of the Five Head Podcast. Must be an election year because things over the last week or so have just been absolutely chaotic. And we're going to try to get into all of it. But before we do, don't forget to like, share, follow, subscribe. Costs you nothing, takes a few clicks, but it really helps a brother out. And if this is the first time listening to the podcast, please go back on YouTube or Spotify or anywhere you get your podcast and check out episodes 1 through 16. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, debates, want to get on the show in some way, want me to bring something up, please feel free to email me at eric.middleviewmedia@gmail.com. That's eric.middleviewmedia@gmail.com. So let's start with the elephant in the room. The killing of Renee Good in Minneapolis by an ICE agent. So here's something that I just don't understand. No matter what is ever done or said, no matter how big or small it is, a political line is drawn and people pick a side of that line and will argue, support, and debate that side of that line to the figurative death. And I do not understand that. Because take all the video analysis out of it, take all the politics out of it. When you look at this situation, what happened with Renee Good, from a 30,000-foot, just common sense view, there was absolutely no reason for the agent to draw his weapon and shoot her. I get it was a high tense situation, split-second decisions were made, but this particular ICE agent made the wrong decision. And you could 100% fully support and back the blue in every way possible and still acknowledge that this particular agent in this particular situation made the wrong call. You can overall fully support the tough on immigration stance that the Trump administration has taken during his second term and still acknowledge the fact that the agent in this situation made the wrong call. You can also acknowledge that self-defense, even to the death of someone else, is perfectly acceptable. It's natural as a species. And still acknowledge the fact that the agent in this situation made the wrong call. So let's get into the details of it. Did Renee Good and her wife make a series of bad choices? Absolutely. First and foremost, she's a mom. Her kids were expecting her to pick her up from school that day. That should be your number one thought in everything you do in life. Should I go try to ruffle up some feathers with ICE today, or could that impede my ability to be able to get to my kids this afternoon? Also, in the actual situation, she made a couple bad choices. Agents were telling her to get out of the car. Maybe she should have got out of the car. The agent stepped in front of her car. Maybe she shouldn't have tried to drive away when there's someone standing in front of her car. It's easy in hindsight to say someone shouldn't have reacted a certain way, but how many times have you been in a situation where you did or said something in the moment, and then later on, in hindsight, said, I shouldn't have reacted that way. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. We're all human. We're all imperfect. And sometimes in a high pressure, high tense situation, we're going to make the wrong call. We do not deserve to lose our lives for that. As a matter of fact, I would say law enforcement on the local, state, or federal level are trained, or at least they should be trained, to understand that in high tense, high adrenaline, high pressure situations, sometimes civilians who are imperfect human beings are going to make a bad choice. And the reaction to that bad choice should never be to pull out your weapon and shoot them. I also do not believe she intended to run over the ICE agent. Why, Eric? Do you know Renee? Do you know what her intentions are? No, I don't know Renee, but I do know that 99.99% of everyone in 99.99% of any situation they're ever in is not intending to run someone over with their car. Maybe she bumped the officer, but when you're arguing intent, no common sense here says she intended to run the officer over. She freaked out. Her wife was just verbally going crazy the entire video. There was a lot going on. She's an imperfect human, so she was trying to flee the scene that she had really no part in anyway. So this idea that she intended to kill the ICE agent with her car is ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face, and it's ridiculous when you actually see the video. If she was alive today, she'd probably say, I didn't mean to bump him. I was just trying to get out of there. I don't believe for a second she intended to put his life at risk. And you can argue that she made a bad choice in trying to drive away while there was someone standing in front of her car. Sure, she made a bad choice, but I stick by what I said, that ICE agent should understand that in a situation like this, sometimes an imperfect human being who is not trained to handle a high intense situation like this is going to make the wrong choice. A freak-out wrong choice should not warrant being shot and killed on the spot. The agent caused the unsafe situation for himself by stepping in front of a moving vehicle. So the natural thing to do would be jump out of the way and deal with the potential suspect once the vehicle is not moving. And he was clearly able to jump out of the way. He was bumped by the car, which sucks. Could have broken his rib. I don't know what pain he's in right now. He shouldn't have been bumped by the vehicle, 100%. But being bumped by the vehicle doesn't warrant pulling out your gun and ending this person's life. She's a human being. She's a mom. She's a daughter. She's an aunt. She's a sibling. Law enforcement's number one priority is preserving the life of the citizens that they serve and protect. And I would even argue, when you sign up to protect and serve, that is the number one priority, even over your own life. That's why you're given a gun. That's why you're put in situations that could take your life, because the expectation is you are going to protect and serve others before you protect and serve yourself. I fully believe this ICE agent made the complete wrong call and should be responsible for her death. So this is a situation that I am dubbing the yellow light situation, because at some point in everyone's life, literally and figuratively, you're going to face the yellow light situation. A light turns yellow and you have a split-second decision to make. You're either going to hit the gas or hit the brake. And either one of those could be the right call or could be the wrong call, depending on what's going on around you. And what happened in Minneapolis with Renee Good and this ICE agent became a yellow light situation. Renee Good chose to hit the gas, literally and figuratively, and the agent chose to hit the gas as well. And all I'm saying is, as much as we try to justify his actions, I believe that as a federal agent or federal law enforcement or local or state law enforcement that carries a weapon and has the authority to use lethal force, anytime you're hit with a yellow light situation, the first and natural reaction should be to hit the brake, even when others around you are hitting the gas. So at the start of the episode, I talked about this political line that's drawn on everything, and people have to pick a left side of that political line or the right side of that political line and argue it to the figurative death. But in doing so, you leave yourself open to be called out for hypocrisy. Because at some point, someone that you support, someone in your party or your party as a whole is going to do something that kind of goes against what their preached ideology is. And when that happens, do you support it if it goes against your general ideology simply because it's your party that's doing it? And does that make you a hypocrite if you do support it? See, I don't think it necessarily makes you a hypocrite when you support something that goes kind of against the general ideology that you support. First of all, we don't even have Democrat and Republican ideology anymore, and I'll get to that in a second. But what I'm saying is, I think most of us have common sense. And in every situation, that common sense hits us deep down. Now, from a public standpoint, when you're posting on social media or you're giving a speech or you're on camera in some way, you pick a side and you stick to that side. You do that for votes. You do that to sway opinion. You do that to drive more people to support your side, sure. But deep down, there is a common sense feeling about any particular situation. An example of this is the 10% cap on interest rates for credit cards that the Trump administration is now proposing. And it's completely flipped the script on everyone. All of a sudden, Republicans are supporting this idea of essentially socialist-style price controls over the free market. And Democrats are essentially supporting rich banks and their ability to use predatory practices to make a profit in the name of the free market. Now, on its face, that is completely hypocritical in every single way. It's like both sides are being hypocrites here. But really, I think both sides agree the free market shouldn't have socialist-style price controls across the board. However, there needs to be some sort of regulation so we can stop predatory practices. Now, as far as this 10% cap on credit card interest rates goes, for me personally, I believe more in the free market. I don't agree with this idea of capping interest rates at 10%, but I do agree with the idea of stopping predatory practices. It's just, is offering credit to someone who would otherwise not be approved for it, but charging a 30% interest rate, is that predatory? Because if you need that $1,000 and you get denied, you're going to be upset. You're going to think that's predatory. If you really need that $1,000 and you get approved for it, you're going to be happy. You're going to feel like there was nothing predatory about it. So in general, I don't agree with Trump's proposal here. AOC and Bernie Sanders tried to propose this and everyone shot it down. So I don't know where Trump is coming up with this or why he's coming up with this. Apparently this is only for a year. It just doesn't make sense. And you're trying to sell it to your base that is against big government control over the free market. Or at least that's what they claim the ideology is. So a couple minutes ago, I mentioned that there is no more left and right ideology. I honestly believe that. Right now, Donald Trump is the most powerful man that has ever walked the face of this earth. He can completely flip a narrative across the entire United States and even now the world with a single post on social media. There's no more party standards. There's no more party ethics and morals. There's only two ideologies right now. One, support everything Trump does, hands down, to the full extent. Or two, oppose everything Trump does, hands down, to the full extent, no matter what it is. That's the only two ideologies right now. That's the only two policy drivers right now. If you voted for Trump and then you disagree with him on any little thing, no matter what it is, the MAGA bros consider you to be a left-wing radical. You are kicked out of MAGA. You have to support that 100% or you don't belong. If you're a Democrat, you generally oppose Trump and you voted against him. If you happen to agree with any little thing he does, you're no longer a Democrat. You've been labeled MAGA now. And people will flip-flop on their supposed morals, ethics, policy ideas, and ideology as long as it either A, supports everything Trump does, or B, opposes everything Trump does. And then both sides call each other sheep. And I've been saying for a few episodes now that our national divide has gotten so deep, and this is kind of it coming to a head now. It's so deep that there is no more Democrat-Republican. There's no more set of policies that mass amounts of people get behind. There's only support Trump or oppose Trump, and that's it. And this has been proven just over the last couple weeks. Like this 10% cap on interest to credit cards has made everyone flip-flop on their stance on price controls of the free market. Trump said we should do it, so now all of a sudden Republicans support it. And on the flip side of that, we have Democrats who are now against it. Democrats who propose this themselves are against it. It makes no sense. This is also proving with the whole Maduro situation. Back in 2019, it was Democrats screaming for Trump to end the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Like, literally, House and Senate Democrats on TV begging Trump to end the Maduro regime. And the fact that Trump didn't go in and do it, they said was completely wrong. It was against American interests to not do it. It was a national security threat to America to not end his regime. And back in 2019 and 2020, when Democrats were saying that, Republicans were saying, no, Trump is doing the right thing by not ending the regime because it's not up to us to end other countries' governments. We're supposed to be America first. Let people handle their own countries. Let's focus on ourselves. Fast forward to 2025, Trump ends the Maduro regime in Venezuela, and the script has been completely flipped again. So again, is this hypocrisy, or is there some sort of common sense in the middle? Or is it, like I'm saying, there's just no more standard across the board for our collective political parties anymore? I mean, do we have principles anymore? I don't mean individually, I mean collectively for the two parties in our system. And people will say, what's it going to take to get rid of these two parties and start over? Well, I think we've reached ahead because there's no longer two parties. There's no, this is a Democrat stance, this is a Republican stance. Let's debate it. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's find the common sense middle. The only stance both sides take now is support Trump 100% or oppose Trump 100%, no matter what it is and no matter how many times it requires them to be hypocritical or flip-flop on a previous stance. That's where the deep divide in this country has led us to. So, also going on this week, we have oral arguments being heard in the Supreme Court over whether or not trans women should be allowed to play women's sports. And I get that the trans community is fighting for different rights, they're a minority community, and all of that's great. I have nothing against the trans community. I just feel like common sense should have ended this argument long before it got to the Supreme Court. Currently, in the U.S., our sports are set up in a way that you excel through size, strength, speed, and relative agility that comes with that size, strength, and speed. And biologically, men are bigger, faster, and stronger than women, which is why we have women's sports in the first place. It's just crazy to me that we're even having these oral arguments in the Supreme Court when common sense would say a man like me, 6'5", 230 pounds, shouldn't be playing in a woman's sport. But when you explain the simple fact that men are bigger, faster, stronger, that's why we have women's sports in the first place, the argument shifts to, no, we're not talking about allowing men in women's sports. We're talking about trans women who took puberty blockers before reaching puberty, who are on hormones, who are taking all this medication to block the natural advantages that being a biological male give them in sports so that they could play on the women's team because they identify as a woman. But isn't that discriminatory in itself as well? Now you're discriminating against other trans women because we're told the only thing that makes you a woman is simply identifying yourself as a woman. So if I, 6'5", 230 pounds right now, simply say I identify as a woman, and then you say, even though you're a trans woman, you're not a trans woman who has done XYZ first, aren't you discriminating against my transgenderism? Now, aren't you saying I can't play in women's sports because I'm not trans enough? That my self-identity of being a woman is not good enough? Isn't that discriminatory against trans women? Isn't women's sports inherently discriminatory by gender? Isn't that the reason we have women's sports? So I am biologically a male and I identify as a man. So I think just to keep up with the vernacular, that makes me a cisgendered man, right? I'm not allowed to play in women's sports because I'm a man. So is that not discrimination against me based on my gender identity? So why is discriminating against me based on my gender identity when it comes to women's sports? Why is that okay? But discrimination against a trans woman when it comes to women's sports is not okay. Like the whole argument just flips on itself. Inherently, women's sports is discriminatory. That's why we have women's sports in the first place. You could put this entire argument to bed by simply asking everyone one question. Why do we even have women's sports? Because the only way to explain why we have women's sports in general is to explain the exact reasons why biological males shouldn't be playing in women's sports. It's just funny to me because out of all the things going on, out of all the things that could make it to SCOTUS to be argued and debated, we're debating whether or not a biological male and all the advantages that come with being a biological male should be allowed to play in a sport that was created to separate those biological differences and take away the advantages of those biological differences. Why not just remove women's sports altogether? I mean, my youngest plays t-ball, and there's women in t-ball, so why not just make them play co-ed all the way through? Because you know that there will come a point, usually by high school, where the women cannot compete with the boys who have been trained in that sport the same amount of time. If I stepped onto a basketball court right now against a WNBA player, she would run circles around me. Even though I'm 6'5", 230. It might be hard for her to box me out. I may win in the paint as far as boxing out goes, but she's a better shooter than I am because I suck at basketball. She's a better dribbler than I am because I suck at basketball. She would run circles around me because she's been trained since she was a little girl on how to play the game of basketball. I was not, and I suck at it. I am really bad at basketball. I am wasted height. When my friends used to like to go play pickup games and they would bring me, we'd get to the court, I'm 6'5". As they're picking teams, everyone's always like, I got big man, and I would be like, you don't want this big man. I'll get you a rebound or two, but you don't want me shooting. You don't want me trying to dribble. You don't want me on the court. So when people make the argument, please, you think you're better than a WNBA player because you're a boy? No, I don't. However, if I trained at basketball as a little kid, like they did, and we had the same amount of years of training, I would run circles around the WNBA player. That is the point. It's not that women can't compete in sports, and some women are going to be better at some sports than some men, but in general, sports are co-ed to a certain age, and then they split off for a reason. And again, this has nothing to do with being against the transgender community in any way. Transgenderism does not bother me. I don't know why it bothers so many people. I have no problem using someone's preferred pronouns or referring to them as ma'am instead of sir or whatever the case in order to keep a happy relationship with them, whether it's a coworker or some extracurricular teammate or a parent to one of the kids in our school. I'm happy to be respectful and refer to them how they want and get on with a good relationship with them. No problem at all. And people will make the argument, yes, but men who are biologically men didn't take puberty blockers, didn't take hormones, identifying as a woman in order to jump into women's sports and completely slaughter all the women in that sport and take all the accolades. That doesn't happen. That is rare. The goal here is for the actual trans women to be able to feel like they can compete within the identity of which they identify with. That doesn't happen, right? Well, if that doesn't happen, then why are you against the rule that biological men should not be playing in women's sports? Now, either way, from a legal standpoint, I think this should be left up to the states. It's a state issue. And then the state should be left up to the local community. Because if everyone in the local community is perfectly happy with this transgender teenager playing on the women's sports team, then they should let him or her play on the sports team. Who cares? Like, we don't need a national law that allows it or a national law that bans it. Like, why is this at the federal level at all? So there's people in one county that would say, I would not let a trans woman play on my daughter's sports team. Okay. But maybe the next county over, everyone there doesn't care. So why ban it across everywhere if the people are okay with it in some areas? This is why, in general, I believe in everything being a states' rights issue, because different people in different areas are going to see things differently. So we shouldn't blanket it across all areas on the federal level. States should be allowed to make these decisions as long as they're not violating anyone's constitutional rights. And you cannot make the argument that not allowing trans women to play in women's sports is against the constitutional right unless you're willing to say that not allowing men to play in women's sports is against the constitutional right as well, because women's sports are inherently discriminatory by gender. Again, this is not rocket science, but it is entertaining to listen to Supreme Court arguments. Have you ever listened to any of these oral discussions? They're fascinating. The judges always have very specific, previously thought about questions, and they've thought of ways of asking in a way that makes a point. And these lawyers, I don't care what side you're on, these lawyers are so good at being able to answer anything that they ask. And they don't get mad. It's not like a TV show where they're yelling. They don't take it to extreme rhetoric. They just are able to concisely answer everything that's asked of them. And it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating to listen to. And when listening to these oral arguments, and we knew this was going to happen when this case hit the Supreme Court, there was a discussion in there, and there will continue to be this discussion about being able to even define a man and a woman in general. And on one hand, I get it. That's the whole point of people that are trying to separate sex from gender. I get that. At the same time, it's like, Jesus, how did we get to a point in this country where we can't even define what a man and a woman is at the Supreme Court level? It's crazy. And I'm not dogging it. The whole point of our system and the Supreme Court and our Constitution is that even the smallest percentage of our population can fight for some sort of right at the highest level. I get that. That's great. It's just when you take a step back and just look at this overall, we're literally trying to define what a man and a woman is at the Supreme Court level. And no one in that courtroom is able to define it. Not the judges and not the lawyers who are pleading their cases on this case. Everyone can define what a duck is, what a dog is, what a cat is. No one can define what a human man and a human woman is. It's crazy to me. At the end of the day, the Supreme Court's going to hold up the ruling that trans women cannot be in women's sports. Whether you agree with that or not, that's going to be the ruling. And that's why I say this should be a state's issue. So we don't need a Supreme Court ruling that is now forced on all 50 states across the board, when there could be people in communities in those states that have absolutely no problem with the single transgender person they have in that community playing in women's sports. When you give the federal government all the power to make the decisions across the board, they're going to make decisions across the board, whether you like it or not. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to any of these oral arguments, you should listen to them. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. They're just impressive to listen to. Anyways, that's the episode for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, debates, let me know in the comments and I'll try to address it in the next episode. Or you could email me at eric.middleviewmedia@gmail.com. Thank you guys for listening. Bye, out.